Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Monster Report, a show highlighting those entertaining creatures of film history. You are on live with us today, the Monster Report Live, and it is Halloween season. So happy Halloween out there, everyone. And you're probably watching all kinds of your favorite Halloween movies that are out there, anything filled with spooks and specters and things like that. One of my favorites to watch during October is the original Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2, but especially the original. That's the one I grew up with. Some of you out there grew up with as well. And so we're going to be talking some Ghostbusters, the legacy it has left behind, and how it's impacted us and its cultural impact as well. So this is going to be a fun episode. I'll bring my guests in just a minute, just letting everyone out there know. Like, subscribe, comment, all of those great things. Join us in the chat today. We're glad to get your questions and comments in on this episode. You can also do super chats and actually support the Monster Report. And I appreciate all the love and support we've gotten for this channel since 2014 when we began it. We are now actually at about 93,000 subscribers, and that is thanks to you guys because of support for this channel. It has gotten to that point, and thank you so much. Get us to that whatever, I don't know, the medallion that they give you at 100,000 subscribers. It used to be like gold. I don't know what it's made of now, but whatever it is, let's get that, and we'll display it as we're doing these shows. We're also actually, and I'll be showing this at a certain point, is the link to TeePublic, and you can actually get Monster Report merch. This is something so brand new that I haven't even gotten my own shirts from TeePublic yet, but it's out there. It's affordable. It's a good time to get it because I think there's even a discount out there. So check that out. I know it's TeePublic/Monster Report, Monster Report with one R, and we will get that link on the screen here in a few, but I'm going to bring in my guests, and we're going to talk some Ghostbusters. And one of my guests, you know, because he's been on the show before, we have Mr. Chris Oglio. Chris, good to have you back.
Thanks for having me back, Nick. Appreciate it.
And new to the Monster Report, we have Nick Bove, also joining us from, not joining from the same place, Staten Island, New York, but he's from the same area, from New Jersey. Nick, good to have you.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, and thank you so much, gentlemen. I was throwing out the idea to Chris maybe last week about talking some Ghostbusters, and well, there's a story there because I said, you know, anyone else who might like to join us, and I think you had somebody in mind.
Yeah, I did. It was funny because me and Nick were both at a concert Friday night, and you had messaged me, and I was like, wow, this is like perfect timing. So I said to Nick, I was like, hey, you want to go on this show, The Monster Report? My friend Nick does, and he was like, about Ghostbusters. I was like, oh yeah, I'll be there. It'd be great. So that's kind of how it started. So it was perfect timing, Nick.
And I didn't realize until afterwards when we started chatting actually that how much of a fan he was, and it was just like, yeah. Man, this dude's the real deal. And
I said I knew the perfect guy. I said it worked out perfect. You know?
And now we get to join him.
Yeah, thank you.
I was going to say, now we get to join and see what his man cave is like. So we will get the chance to talk some collectibles because we Chris and I are big collectible guys too. Chris is showing off a bit of his collection. I actually have very minimal Ghostbusters. I leave that to my son, Eli, to start the Ghostbusters collection. And he's a big, huge fan. We'll get some chats in here and we'll start talking, actually, gentlemen. Yosh, good friend of Everett out there. Good to see you, Yosh, and have you in here. And Brendan, Autistic Lizard Productions, had him on about a week or so ago on the channel. So thank you for being in the chat, supporting us. So talking some Ghostbusters, what was your first exposure? Let's start with Chris, then go to Nick. What was your first exposure? Was it the films, cartoons, collectibles? How did it begin for you?
For me, it began definitely with the cartoon, and it's sort of the same thing with, I know we've talked about this in the show before, Nick, about, our first exposure to Godzilla, and we can remember what film, where we were, etc. But for me, it's like Ghostbusters comes at the same time as, Ninja Turtles and Thundercats and Transformers. I don't remember a time before it, really. It's just something from when I was very, very little. It was just something that I watched and I was into. And it's like, I can't remember when I originally saw it. I just know I was hooked on it.
Yeah, so the cartoon series, and then later everything else.
Yep, and then from there, I was exposed to the 2 films, and just always been a lifelong lover of Ghostbusters.
All right, and Nick, it really sparked something in you. So tell us where it all began for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna say definitely with the cartoons as well, especially because of the toys, obviously. So the cartoon along with the toys really, piqued my interest, and then I guess I got into the first. Remember the first copy of the movie I actually had was basically taped off of television, so it had commercials in between. And I think it was actually missing the whole beginning part with the library. So I didn't actually see that part until a little bit later on when I saw an actual copy of the movie. But yeah, I think that's the first time is basically just with the real Ghostbusters cartoon series and the figures and stuff like that.
Yeah, and there's definitely a story to talk about that cartoon series we'll get into at a certain point. But for me, it was the rental store, the video rental store, and it was sitting there on the shelf. It was definitely around 85 or so. I didn't see it theatrically in 84. I was only 3, I'd say, but it was somewhere in that area. And I do remember renting it and getting scared, but also like when my first exposure to Godzilla, getting scared, but also loving every minute of it and saying there's still something that draws me to this, almost like a roller coaster ride. It's like, that was scary. I want to do it again. I want to watch it again. I want to experience that again. And so there was definitely something about that, but it was also, for me, the music, the merchandise. I think there was Hardee's even had some sort of like cups or things like that. They didn't have a Happy Meal or something. Oh, you probably got it back there.
Oh yeah, they're back there. Yeah, I think I actually have. I can bring it over right now. Actually, I have a Hardee's. They had these little books.
Cool.
Hardee's
me back.
headquarters.
Oh,
Yes,
wow.
that. We had a Hardee's in my little hometown. We didn't
Yeah.
even have a McDonald's, but we had a Hardee's, and that I remember getting actually. So
Yeah, I have the pencil case that's over there too, the little white pencil case.
oh man, he is bringing me back. And I even think I think there was mugs and obviously the soft drink cups and things like that. There was definitely a real push there, and it was just, there was so much catchiness and familiarity with it, and the hero kind of thing going on too, because the ghosts in your closet, under your bed, things like that. But here were some heroes that you could kind of rely on. You could kind of like in your imagination fight back, in a sense, I think.
Yeah, they had the tools, they had the talent. I mean, that's what it required. So yeah,
That's right.
I agree. I completely
Everett's
agree.
in the house. Thank you, Everett. Who are you going to call?
What's up, Everett?
Awesome. Good to have you here. And guys in the chat, if you have any questions for our Ghostbuster panel that we have here, Nick could probably answer every trivia question that's out there.
Yeah.
I hope.
yeah, absolutely.
It's a funny story because, and I don't know if we could reminisce about this, Nick, but me and Nick both went to intermediate school together. So we were in art class and stuff, I think for 2 years in IS-75 together. And I remember that's kind of like how we were kind of talking one day. And I always remember knowing you as a Ghostbusters fan, my first exposure to that, because we were talking about movies we watched over and over again. And you were like, I've watched the original Ghostbusters movie like X number of hundreds of times. And we were like, whoa, really? And like I never knew. And that's kind of how you started talking about your love of Ghostbusters, which is how me and Nick knew each other from like 7th grade or 6th grade, So
Yeah.
it was pretty wild stuff. It was like, I just kind of remember that today because we were doing this panel. I was like, oh, I remember that,
Yeah, it's definitely it just goes to show, the movie, it's definitely stuck with me. I know it's stuck with you, and it's just timeless. It's great.
And I guess when it comes down to that replayability for you, Nick, what is it that I guess initially drew you to you, and then why does it have that replayability for you?
It's interesting. I feel like the people around I'm in my mid-30s, and I feel like people my age, there's this nostalgia about movies that came out in the 80s, and we grew up in New York City, so a movie that took place in New York City with some of the the biggest actors of the time. It's a comedy / horror movie. I mean, and there was so much good about it, and I guess at the time too, so much uncertainty about it because it was such a different movie from everything, and they were really taking a gamble. I guess that's what, for me at least, allows me to watch it over and over again. And then I guess the fact of knowing that they really ad-libbed a lot of those lines. Like they really just worked so well off each other, that there's just so many quotable lines. You can just go, we were talking before about your the trailer that you redid, and I said you just basically encapsulated everything great about the movie in this like one nice sequence, and I really appreciate it as the fan that I am.
Yeah. And talking about the legacy, Chris, before actually you were on, Nick and I were talking about, I remember it being said that 84 was actually considered the year of G, Gremlins, Ghostbusters, and Godzilla. And so I guess the legacy of even all three of those franchises has lived on. Why is it you think that the legacy lives on, even if you could be a hardcore fan like Nick? And I guess I would consider myself and yourself more of amateurish fans. We've got some collectibles, but we've also got a real love and appreciation for this film. Why is it that it holds that legacy for so long?
Well, I mean, sort of going back to what Nick was saying, it was this magnetic cast and a absolutely wonderful director and a story that, really sort of wasn't told before. I mean, yes, people can argue yes, there was a Ghostbusters beforehand, the 1970s movie with Tracy the Gorilla, who was Paul Burns and stuff like that, and then there was Filmation cartoons. But Ghostbusters itself, it got into pop culture very fast, and I think between the movies, the first two films, the cartoon especially, a whole generation grew up and then sort of passed that level of Ghostbusters on to other generations. I remember even for myself, like one of my little cousins in like the early 2000s, it was right around the time they were starting to do some of the a little more higher end collectibles that were coming out. And like he was getting into Ghostbusters and he was young, and I bought him the set. It was just like, oh man, because there really wasn't a lot of Ghostbuster stuff. And now that you see it more and more, it's just, I mean, every Halloween you see somebody dressed up with a proton pack. Every convention there's a Ghostbuster dressed up there. It's so ingrained in our consciousness, not only because it's a fun film, but there's that little bit of scare tactics, and it's just you root for them, you root for the team, and those are memorable characters, and I think ones that will stand the test of time.
Yeah, the funny thing when you said how iconic the characters, the actors in it, the look of it in those uniforms, I don't remember if it was in the Blu-ray or DVD release that they had Ivan Reitman and Dan Aykroyd talking about the legacy, and how they talked about how the first time they were all in uniform running through the sidewalks of a New York street, and it was at that moment that they really knew they had something special, because the concept was cool and all that, and it was maybe a hit or miss movie, and it's going to be kind of funny, but we're also going to have some serious scenes in it and such. But then when they got in those uniforms, there was just something about it that the camera loved about it. And I don't even think they told the people on the streets that they were running through the crowds and things that they were filming, or they were pitching a movie or trying to get shots for a movie.
Right. Well, there's that funny story that Ivan Reitman has said about, because at the time there was a bit of a legal, I guess, a battle, so to speak, of was the film going to be called Ghostbusters or something else, because they were, I think, trying to get the rights from Filmation. Is that correct, Nick?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I think that was owned at the time by Universal. So there was a whole back and forth with that. So they shot some of those early scenes, from what I've understood, two ways, where people were shouting, Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, and then they were using the alternative title. And they just said it just worked so much better when you heard that name, Ghostbusters.
That's also the reason, I think, for the black banner, if I recall too. And when they're hanging the banner originally, when the car first is introduced as well, and it's like a black sign with white font, because at that point in the movie when they were shooting that scene, they still weren't sure if it was going to be called Ghostbusters or not yet. So they had multiple signs made with the multiple names that they had just in case, basically.
Well, and then, I mean, was the compromise, other than the alternate title, to do Ghost Space Busters, I guess, rather than it being a one word? I mean, almost like you serious? That's the compromise kind of thing. Was that kind of part of the story too?
I know it was Ghost Smashers. Was
Smashers.
One of the it was Ghost Smashers, but I know I remember Dan Aykroyd's original script had more of a multi-dimensional aspect that they kind of, Harold Ramis and Ivan Reitman kind of rewrote with Dan Aykroyd to kind of, I guess, fit the budget at the time to bring it, less multi-dimensional and on into Manhattan. So I know that, and the suit, they had like different suits, and they were a little bit more cosmic. But yeah, I think Ghost Smashers was the alternate. I don't know if there was any other ones off the top of my head though.
Yeah, and it was like, that is a cool title, and they even, probably the filmation side of things probably capitalized a little on the success of these Ghostbusters, and then even the cartoon series we refer to as the real Ghostbusters, which is kind of funny way of differentiating itself from its filmation counterpart, I guess you could say. So that's very cool. Some new people in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us today.
David Kramsky, how are you, buddy?
So I was going to say maybe some people that are familiar with you gentlemen.
Yeah,
Bobby Reynolds, good to see you. Godzilla fan there. Foul Mouth Gamer Z. Hello.
Hey, Chris Rivas, how are you?
Okay. Yeah.
Hey, Chris.
That is. Ghostbusters in life. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
And yeah, so like I said, for me, this is probably more of a seasonal thing to come back to around Halloween. I, get the chance to see my kids dress up in the Ghostbusters costumes that they've had. And it's cool to see this next generation get into it. And now even we've got the new movie Afterlife. I think you were talking before, Nick, about before we went on, is there's even a new video game, right?
Yeah, so this past week, I think it's been out a week already, is Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed, which is the first online playable Ghostbusters game. So that makes it really fun, and it's cross-platform as well. So you can kind of play with friends anywhere, anytime. So that's been pretty fun. Being able to do that and level up, it's pretty cool. It's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So David is doing good. Another Staten Island ghost ad here. Awesome.
All right.
Godzilla fan freaks, you're not getting a kiss from any one of us. Sorry. Even as a kid, I was like, it's like they're possessed by these demons, but these demon dogs, I guess, but they kiss and whatever else. I thought a little strange. Okay, yeah, they've got to summon Zuul and all that, but those were the kinds of things as a kid that really scared me too. I mean, these especially the first film. The second film had its moments definitely too of scare that really made an impact. And I was telling Nick earlier about how even that scene where Winston and Ray are talking in the car, Ecto 1, when they're going over the bridge, they're talking about the Bible and the moon turning to blood and the seas boiling and the skies falling and things like that. Even as a kid, just that little discussion like that, it's almost like a scene that today they would probably throw away because it's not going anywhere. But for me as a kid, that was very memorable, and it was like something that deeply actually impacted me because I hadn't heard things about prophecies of the end of the world and things like that. So it was actually kind of like, is this real? Is this for the movie? Is this something that we actually talk about in the real world? Tell me some of those scenes, gentlemen. Either one of you want to go first, that really made an impact on you with the scare factor or any impact for that matter.
Do you want to go first, Chris? I'll follow up.
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, the one that I had on tape as a kid more often was Ghostbusters 2. And, the scene that there's a few scenes that always kind of spooked me because I love that movie because it's a little bit more spookier at times, I find, than the first movie, at least for me as a viewer. So the scene when they're developing the pictures and they see the river of slime under Vigo, and all of a sudden the pictures catch fire and they're yelling and yelling, and Winston breaks in the door and saves the day. That always kind of scared me as a kid. Or even, obviously, Oscar in the tub and the slime coming out and almost trying to grab him. That just always freaked me out as a kid. Or even when they're down in the subway and it's like, hey, and you hear Winston. That was always a great scene. And I think I have to say probably too, in the first Ghostbusters movie, the scene where she kind of opens the refrigerator and sees Zuul, or when the creatures kind of grab her from the chair and kind of suck her in, and Sigourney Weaver's character into that dimension, always was indelible.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was definitely, in the first Ghostbusters film, any scene with the terror dogs, just because of the sound effects and the growling, and the jump factor, when you see them, you see them clearly in the bedroom when Lois Tully throws the jacket on his head, which it's not too creepy then, but then when he busts through the door, you're just like, whoa, wasn't really expecting that. And I have to say, thinking about it, Ghostbusters 2, I think definitely had a little bit more of a creep factor to it with that subway scene, definitely always with the heads on the spikes and Winston's like looking at them. That always creeped me out. And then the bathtub scene too, as well.
Oh yeah, and even now as a father, yeah, the baby that's being basically targeted by the ghost, and thinking of that as a father, that my child would be actually targeted. And that's why I think that Winston scene, especially the subway, if a ghost is specifically calling you out, not you as a group, you as an individual, and that is absolutely frightening. And it brings back somewhat of the poltergeist movie kind of idea, that the ghost is in the house has actually specifically targeted the most innocent of the family, the child, and the young child at that. And so yeah, there's something about that really strikes a chord with us, even if we're parents or not parents. But yeah, that's what one thing that this isn't for the faint of heart. It isn't not just a comedy, but a horror comedy, action adventure. It's got a little bit of everything. And how is it that, I guess, Nick, tell me, why is it that works? I mean, why shouldn't it just have been a straight up comedy 100% all the way through, but they actually wanted to take some serious notes from the occult and the actual mythology of the spirit world?
I mean, I know, just with all the features on DVDs that you watch, they've mentioned a few times, which these are also movies that I really enjoy too, and I enjoyed as a kid, where like the old Abbott and Costello films, where Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein and they meet the Universal monsters. So it was kind of a way of mixing that like horror element with the comedic element, for there. So it was kind of like that for the new age, and that's always what they said was kind of the idea, was to bring kind of a new element to that genre of movie that they didn't really create, they just kind of expanded on, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, they were even going into the occult, and the idea of Dan Aykroyd, especially being part of the writer of this, and he himself has a lot of somewhat of believer in aliens, believer in cryptozoology and things like that. And so I think bringing him into that, and Ivan Reitman with just his directing skills and all of that, and that this being one of the biggest films that at that time was the biggest film for him to produce, and being able to pitch a film like this, so that is just incredible how that all kind of worked together to bring this great cast together, and great storytelling together. And again, that's where I think sometimes I feel like we miss the mark in the modern age. Would you say, Chris, that sometimes what we see today versus what we had during the times where they were experimenting with script writing, with visual effects, with just a lot of entertainment during that time? Wouldn't you agree that there's some in the risk taking of this actually gives it that long legacy and that impact, that cultural impact?
Oh yeah, I can totally say that. I mean, I think on many levels, like a lot of classic films, you hear stories about, Jaws, Star Wars, Apocalypse Now, Godfather, like all these films like should have been disasters. They had crazy production problems, but somehow through fate, they became these classics. And I think Ghostbusters 2 because it just became one of these films that all the right elements really just came together. And I think you're right, because unfortunately nowadays, so many films studios feel it is best to play it safe, and we know what box office is, what we know works, and this is the demographics. And rather than allow filmmakers to try new things and writers to come up with different concepts, they just want to play it straight. And I think Ghostbusters did something really, really unique, and I think that's probably why it has stayed around as long as it has. It
Oh,
struck a chord.
Yeah, and I want to talk some merch here after I bring in some more chats, actually, and this will be Nick's department, so be ready, Nick.
All right.
Bobby Reynolds, Ghostbusters is awesome. Ghostbusters 2 is underrated. I'd agree.
I agree too.
2016, it was going to be the film that we were maybe going to say is kind of like Voldemort. Is will not be named like a fire. so it's kind of like that disaster you can't get your eyes off of, I guess. Good way of putting it. A little bit. Okay. David. Jonas's eyes lighting up in the hallway.
Oh, Janos.
Janos.
Janos. Yes.
Yeah. That was always
Definitely.
a freaky scene, David. I agree.
Yeah.
But Janos is such a great character too. I mean,
Oh my gosh,
he was just so funny. I mean, I think that's the other thing about it. Not to depart real quick, but the comedy in both films is so good. It's still funny to this day.
I want you to know everything you're doing is bad. I just want you to know. His lines, I mean,
he has some of the best lines, like "Find my bit with goo." Peter McNichol's a great actor.
I think I remember him in the second Addams Family movie. He was like one of the camp counselors or something.
Yeah,
he was hilarious in that, and you don't get to hear his accent, which he doesn't have one. I mean, he's just yeah. But did you catch the number on the locomotive?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, I missed it.
little preoccupied, being terrified out of my mind.
Yeah. All great lines, and again, what makes it iconic, I think of like movies during that era, like Spaceballs. It's a movie that you can quote. These movies you can quote, and everyone knows instantly where you got that from.
Yeah.
So,
and speaking of Spaceball, I mean, Rick Moranis in both movies. I mean, same thing. Just such a he embodied that character so well, and even his lines, just reminiscent of Janos too. Just everything he says, everything that comes out of his mouth is it's hilarious. When in the court scene, when he mispronounces restraining order, and he says, my clients are under a judicial restrangement order. That blue thing that lady gave me, because he has no idea what it is. It's just hilarious. It's so good.
He
does tax law. Sorry.
But it's just good comedy at the end of the day. Like, that's the thing. Like, the timing is there. And again, it goes back to the cast and the creative team. I mean, you could not have chosen a better bunch,
Yeah, you can't, and the characters make it. I mean, the special effects are great, the music's great, but without those characters interacting with one another, then it doesn't have the same magic. But yeah, let's talk about some merch. And Nick has definitely got the merch going on. He blew my son's mind away when he had his proton pack that he powered up. So let's feature some merch, Nick, and give you the chance to show off a little.
Yeah, sure. So obviously behind me, I have a couple glass cases just filled with plenty of. I have my Kenner stuff. I have one dedicated to just some Ectos. Stay Puff, and I have a Slimer cabinet as well. Those are, let me move out of the way. Those are this way, right over there. And there's the proton pack. Got to have the 1-to-1 replica.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
A couple sneakers. I have little pop corner too. So a little bit of everything, and then just have a lot of multimedia formats and records and CDs and stuff like that.
And I gotta say, I think Nick, your collection is it's like the ideal. It's like perfectly, like everything is visible. It's like my collection stuff is so much everywhere, and like you're
took a while.
And it's so neat and orderly. It's like perfect. It's like pristine. I love it.
It took some time. I mean, my wife for a while was very, very patient with me because everything was like pretty much everywhere, and then I finally invested in some cases, and I guess my basement was a mess for about a week, and I just slowly but surely started piecing things together and kind of figuring out where I wanted things. So yeah, this is kind of what I ended up with, and it's nice. It's just kind of this. You walk down into the basement, and anybody who comes by is always like kind of speechless. You can't really you walk right down into my basement, and this is basically what you see on the other side. So, and there's stuff pretty much everywhere else that you can't see as well.
Yeah. I guess my question to you is, just to throw it out there, like, what is your favorite style of Ghostbuster collectible? Like, is there a specific thing? I mean, I know you're a toy guy, but like, is there a specific brand that you like better? Is there one that's like more to your heart?
I think, I mean, the Kenner figures obviously will always hold a place in my heart. They're just so great looking. They're fun. There's so many different, lines that they did, and the Ectos, the Kenner Ectos, I think, are probably my favorite things, and the Firehouse, which you have too, with the box. I'm very jealous of that. I don't have the box anymore, but I think,
I was a
the
weird kid. I kept like 80 to 90% of my boxes. And
yeah.
thank God I did, you know?
Yeah, yeah, those go for quite some money. But the firehouse, when people see it, they're like, oh my God, that's one of those things, one of those accessories. I think that just kind of everybody knew, even if they didn't have it, like they knew somebody who had it.
Yeah.
One of those things, and the same thing with the cars, and maybe even like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. As an adult, I think I got into the Diamond Select figures, and the fact that there was the whole build a figure line with the deluxe, and you can kind of build those the top of Dana's building, and then the front of the firehouse. I think with the first scene, I think those were. I never took them out of the boxes, as you could see, but yeah,
Same
I think
here.
those are a cool line.
And I was going to ask is, so the line that began it all was Kenner, right? They're the first original toy maker for Ghostbusters,
I believe so. Yeah.
the license. And then as it went along, did it switch to another company, or
So was it Toy
Kenner?
Biz Chris that did Extreme Ghostbusters?
Treadmasters,
Oh,
actually.
Treadmasters. I'm sorry, Treadmasters.
Okay. And then, of course, you said Diamond Select. I imagine that even now there's, some of the more high-end toys. Obviously, Funko did some stuff.
Matty Collector. And I mean, you've had
Oh, Matty, yeah.
Hasbro, which, bought the Kenner library, is doing some really great, reissues, which I see Nick has some of them. I have one behind me and stuff. It's just, which is great because it gives people like us that grew up with it, either maybe you missed it or maybe you got rid of it. And I knew a lot of friends that they sold a lot of their stuff in their teens, and now they want it back, and they were able to get it back through those reissues, which have been really great,
Yeah, no,
absolutely.
definitely, yeah.
I was
And
gonna say-
yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, can you maybe feature some of the more things that you usually couldn't get from the store?
Yes. So this is one of the things you kind of have to go to the firehouse to get. So being that I live somewhat close, relatively close. Let me see if I can get this here.
Oh,
So
yeah.
this is a Ladder 8 Tribeca challenge coin.
Oh, beautiful.
So this
Yes.
thing is really awesome. Highly recommend
Amazing.
it. If you haven't been to the firehouse yet, it's on Northmore Street in Manhattan. It's a phenomenal place to go. I'm there every Ghostbusters day. Sometimes they do it June 8th, which is Ghostbusters Day. Last year, I think they did it that weekend because sometimes it'll fall on a weekday, and I think it gets more of a crowd going on the weekend. So
I have to go this year. Every year I miss it, and I keep telling him,
gotta come next time.
this year I got to come. Gotta be there.
I'll remind you again, but you have to.
Please do.
I'll try to get you as much in advance as I can.
That'd be great.
And then this is another. I mean, these go around, but these sell pictures,
Oh,
the animation
Nice.
pictures from the real Ghostbusters. These are again something that they didn't sell in the stores. You kind of just have to find. Some of them are readily available. More harder. Some are harder to get than others. Thank you. I appreciate that, Foulmouth Gamer.
He loves the Proton Pack too.
Yeah, the Proton Pack.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know how easy it is to show off the Proton Pack if it's a heavy deal.
Yeah, I mean it's about 25 to 30 pounds, but I saw someone said they got the Hasbro that one, so I'm waiting on that myself. I'm definitely anticipating that one. I'll try to pick this up and bring it a little bit closer. I have it actually on a guitar stand because it's a nice little way to display it, but I'll put it on the chair that I was sitting on. It should be okay.
While he's getting that ready, I'm
So-
glad because he's got an unlicensed nuclear accelerator here that I'm in Indiana and you gentlemen are in New York. So-
Yeah, it's untested.
Totally safe.
Should have did some tests, but I'll make it a little bit louder. I lowered it, but it kind of has this nice little hum.
that's awesome.
But always impressive, and it turns heads wherever you go, and it's funny because again when I go out in Manhattan and you're kind of dressed the way that my mannequin's dressed right now, you would figure more people would look at you a little weird, but people will stop you and they want to take pictures with you, they want to check it out. I've had the last time I went there, I had undercover cops stop their car. I got nervous, but they popped out of the car. They wanted to take pictures with me. I was like, all right, yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So Let's get you back in here in the regular view. So so impressive, so cool to see that. And yeah, this is definitely something that, you know, the real fans can collect. Like Chris and I are obviously collectors of kaiju collectibles, and we can put small life savings and small fortunes into collectibles because of taking something from an IP that you love and being able to actually hold it. There is something to that. I didn't understand that quite until I feel like I was a little older in life to have that, because I always thought home video is kind of what I want to collect, in books and music and things. But, you know, being able to take, you know, something that is super realistic from an IP, there's just something more real about it, and it becomes something that you see every day. And of course, you get to walk into this every day, and I'm sure you get to turn some heads when people get to see it and see your mini museum that you have.
It's great. It's great. I actually got to participate in a mini parade, during the pandemic in Staten Island, New York. There's an organization called Humble Heroes, and they do this. They're mostly like Marvel characters. You know what I'm talking about, Chris?
Yep.
And I happen to know someone, so at one point I was like, hey, can I hop on? I have a Ghostbusters, full cosplay, everything, and they said, yeah, you can come along, and I'm with a bunch of Marvel characters, so I'm not thinking anybody's gonna know me, but there's parents going, oh, it's a Ghostbuster. It's a kids going, that's a Ghostbuster, and it just makes you feel good as a older fan. You're like, look at this, this kid's 7, 8 years old, and they know who I am.
Oh yeah, and tell me about the firehouse. What the legacy, after the films, the first two films were produced, and that firehouse lived on. What was the legacy of that building?
So that building, as far as I know, used to actually be a double firehouse too. It was actually two houses that became one house. Way before the movie was made, and it's still an active firehouse. There was it's ladder 8, and like I said, on North Moore Street, and they still are day to day. They have a little bit of a Ghostbusters shrine on the inside when you get there, which is pretty cool. And if the doors are open, they're usually very welcoming, very nice guys, and they're expecting people to want to take pictures and stuff. It's such an iconic building to see. When you're walking down the street, and some people don't think to look up, especially if you're from Manhattan.
You can miss it too.
You can, yeah. But then when you point it out, or like on Ghostbusters, when there's people walking around that area, and people are like, what's going on? You're like, oh, it's Ghostbusters Day. We're going to the firehouse. They're like, oh, the firehouse is over here, and they'll follow you, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, because you turn a corner and it's just that beautiful view of just that old historic building, and it's just great to see. It's in great condition, and outside right on the front, right in front of the doors, they have a cool little Ghostbuster symbol painted, and the Buffalo Ghostbusters, and a bunch of people donated to have a new sign made for them and donated to them, and so they hang that proudly above their doors. It's awesome.
That is so cool.
I remember seeing that last year. It was funny. We were going to, I think it was Anime NYC. I was going with John Bellotti, and we drove past it, and I was like, wait, stop, the firehouse over here. And it was right at the time. It was when Afterlife had come out, and they had the sign. I wanted to see it, and just, I'd seen the building before, but when you saw the sign there, it was like this very surreal moment. You just looked up, you're like, wow, this is like your childhood come to life, so to speak, and seeing it was something. It really was.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting noticing the inside doesn't look like the inside from the movie, and that's one thing you're like, oh, that's not what it looks like.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll kind of follow up with that in here in a minute. I also want to make sure that everyone gets a check out the website for TeePublic. User Monster Report, brand new. Get some merch. Going to add to it as we go along. There's going to be Monster Report phone cases, mugs, things like that, all kinds of stuff. So support the Monster Report with that. I'll leave the link there. But let's get back to some Ghostbusters talk here. Bobby thinks that it would be a cool crossover for Ghostbusters and Poltergeist. I mean, hey, why not? That's
cool.
That series of films has its story too. But what's cool about that, that firehouse, I guess when I see it in the films, and then when I see pictures of people who have posted it, does it seem like it's a building that's getting dwarfed by the larger buildings around it now in the modern era?
Maybe, yeah. If you take a step back, I mean, a lot of the buildings right next to it, I think, are original buildings, but right in the backdrop, there's definitely a lot of there's a big apartment buildings,
Sure.
bigger high rises, stuff like that.
Yeah, because it doesn't seem like it's that tall of a building, and it's kind of nestled in that corner, and the buildings around it are so much huger, bigger, and it seems like New York, of course, grows vertically because it doesn't have as much horizontal space, so it's got to build vertically. And an old building like that, there must be a lot of love and care into preserving that, because why keep a small building when we can build a larger one and house more people, utilities, firemen, whatever, but they want to keep it the way it is. And I mean, I don't even know how old that building is.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I'm not sure. I mean, it has to be considered, I would say, a landmark building at some point,
Oh, I think
right? I
not only
mean,
for the film reason, but I mean it's just an old building in and of itself. And I don't know if you've ever noticed it too when we passed it by, Nick. Have you noticed that
mhm.
there's if you go to the side of the building, I remember when I
Yes.
was there, people leave Twinkies
Oh, they
there,
do. You're right. Yes.
which is the funniest thing. And it's just like, and I saw that, it was like, oh, and like you like forget because it's like that one little segment in the movie, but
It's
you
so
see like,
funny because
the big
actually at
Twinkie.
the last Toy Con that I saw you at, that's the one thing I picked up. I picked up a $5 open the Twinkie guy. I forget what his name, but
Yeah,
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 I was like, I need to throw him in my collection just because of Twinkies.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
another scene that could have been thrown away, but even that conversation just adds to the charm of that film, and something that becomes very memorable and very quotable. I want to talk a little Ghostbusters too, because yeah, we've all of us here are fans of it too, and thinking that it's very underrated. I guess
Completely
for me,
underrated, I think.
absolutely.
Mhm.
And I guess what is it about it that actually does, I feel, work well? I mean, that it didn't need to be the exact same film of the first film. It wasn't like the Back to the Future's formula where essentially they're going to tell the same story over again. The formula was sort of still there, but the odds, I guess, and the scale of things were increased, and I felt like that it did try to do something that was a little off the wall, but that's what I love about it. So tell me, I guess, what I guess really did work about the second film.
Nick, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I'll take first swing here. So I think for me, the second film, the first of all, the soundtrack for the second film, I love. I think it captures that like '80s vibe so much, and such iconic tunes that you hear now. You're just like, I want to hear higher and higher, something like that.
Yeah.
So and I think the Ecto 1A for me, just seeing that beautiful car and all those lights and the ticker on the side of it, and the whole feeling of just again being from New York and them kind of vibing off the negative, the mean New Yorker, that stereotype of we're literally going to make a movie about sludge under New York City, just kind of feeding off of the negativity of Manhattan, of this this island. And people kind of miss certain aspects of it. I feel like of the feeling of and the time it takes place, the holiday season, the fact that they were heroes at the end of the first movie and now they're kind of stuck with the bill in the second movie, and they kind of have to rebuild that trust in the public's eye because of everything that happened. And there's that redemption moment in the courtroom scene where they're back, and it's just like from then on it's just this roller coaster of awesomeness, I feel like, after that.
Mhm. Go for it.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's it was such a great theme to do the river of slime and feeding off the bad vibes, so to speak. But I completely think the film is underrated in many respects because I've always, and again, maybe some people think this is sacrilege. I think it's one of the better sequels to a movie ever. A lot of people say Terminator 2 and stuff like that, but Ghostbusters 2 for me is like just as worthy of a sequel because it really builds on the first. The stakes are higher. It's a little bit more spookier, and there's just a lot of great character stuff because the first one has a lot of exposition learning about the main team, but you're kind of able to go more right into it. And I mean, it's funny. It's just got a lot of really iconic moments, and I think has a wonderful villain. I think Vigo the Carpathian is awesome, and you really feel like, wow, this is he's a danger. Like he felt very threatening. Azul did too, but like there was a certain element that was different with Vigo, I think. And I think it's a completely overlooked movie, and people sometimes think, oh, it's not as good. And I think, I love the first two films for various different reasons. Two hold a special place in my heart because, like I said earlier, it's the movie that I had growing up. I had a copy of it, and that's the one I watched the most.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Me too. Because the stakes, especially because there is something when an adult is in danger in the first film. We have the stakes of losing Dana and Lewis. Essentially through this, and the city being haunted by things. But essentially, it's all still kind of closed in. All of New York, but for the main characters, it's Dana and her baby, which really, strikes to the heart of these characters as to why they would risk life, limb, and personal safety and all that to go after the villain in this. And of course, thinking of an off the wall way of getting inside that museum, getting the Statue of Liberty, and then you get that whole. It actually just draws something out of you. You talked about the music, and there's such great timing with the editing of this, with the music and how it works well together. They're not two separate entities that every once in a while look and feel like they work together. They absolutely fall in line with one another. And that kind of pacing of how that film all unfolds to give you that good feeling of the heroes have arrived. They're going to strike down the bad guy and right off into the sunset in a sense. So there was that really cool heroic kind of feel to it, and a sense of redemption, like you said, and then all of the New Yorkers coming together and congratulating one another, and then the whole New York New Year that they had, celebrating it with that. I think that just worked well for me too, and was a good send off for the original cast. Remember when Dan Aykroyd was in the Casper movie? Doing a little self, kind
I remember that, Chris.
Yeah, I remember loving that once I saw that. Oh my gosh, that's Dan Aykroyd. That's three stands.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, what a great New York movie too. I think in every single, New York film tours and see famous locations, I mean, you always see something for Ghostbusters, whether it's the firehouse or the apartment building at the end of the first film. But as a kid, for me, this was one of my. I lived here my whole life, but this was like one of those great New York elements. And I remember my very first trip to the Statue of Liberty. I went to the top, and I was probably like 5 years old, and it was my sister told me, he's like, oh, this is where the Ghostbusters were. And like, you saw it in the movie. I watched all the time as a kid, but then when you're in there, it's like, wow, I'm in the same location as like some of my heroes were, and that's just, it's great. And there's so many wonderful, they just get the feel of the city in so many ways. And yeah, of course they shot a lot of it in Los Angeles and whatnot, but it just gets those great New York parts,
I would have definitely took my NES Advantage up there to the top of the.
Yep.
Yeah. Another little moment as a kid that I was just like, oh, there, I've got that. Yeah. Yep. Or when they mentioned He-Man in it, another one of my favorite IPs.
Yeah.
Just like, yeah. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, the maybe the underwhelming success it had was due to timing of its release and its competition during that time.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I'm not sure off the top of my head. I can't. I mean, I know maybe you guys. I know you're big film guys, but in the sense that for that one, I think it was just poor timing. I think there was a whole issue with the script supposedly not being what the actors really were going with. The studio was really pushing it. Bill Murray was kind of, I think, out of a time where he was kind of, wanted to take a break too, and so I think there was a lot and again, I think the movie's amazing. I don't even, you watch it, you're like, I can't believe any of this was kind of really going on at the same time. But I think it just had a lot kind of, working against it at the time. And I think if people rewatch it, they kind of might see, a different side to it, hopefully, maybe, at least in my eyes.
Yeah, I know. And I think 1989, I'm trying to think, we
big year for franchises. Very huge.
Batman.
TMNT, Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot.
You had Karate Kid 3, you had Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, you had, I think, Back to the Future Part 3 as well.
Ah, that's right, yeah.
So, and I believe it was what, I believe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Batman is what was the #1 movie, and it took it from it sort of stole Ghostbusters 2's thunder because it was, I think, released around the same time.
That's what I was thinking too. I think they kind of released, if not the same weekend, but around the same time, where it
Yeah,
did, affect box office numbers.
yeah,
And boy, that'd be hard to go up against. Is that was such a huge release for that time, and yeah, that's so. I guess timing, if it came out maybe a year prior or whatever, and I think even Ivan Reitman's idea was that he's kind of done. We did it. We struck gold. But the studio was going to say that, well, if you don't do it, we're going to do it without you, and it was kind of like, I better go ahead and direct it and go ahead and have the original cast back. If it's going to be done, it's going to be done right. And, I can't argue with that. And I even see some of that I think he directed the film Evolution with David Duchovny as well. I kind of felt some of the Ghostbusters vibes and comedy with that. It's another one that you don't really often think about, but it's like, that and he did Stripes, I think, right? With
Stripes. He did Kindergarten Cop. He did
I was just gonna say
Twins.
Kindergarten Cop I watched recently too, and just the kid I think has Ghostbuster sheets at some point, like the real Ghostbuster sheets
Yep,
on the
and the
bed.
kid is Oscar because they were
Yeah.
twins.
oh,
Yes.
right. Yeah.
From
Right.
from Ghostbusters 2 because they were twins, and obviously when you're dealing with child actors, you have so much time with them on set. So if you hire a twin, you're able to shoot longer because you can use one set of kids for a few hours in another set, in the same scenes, So
Yeah, and when you think about the comedy in Kindergarten Cop too, such a serious movie, but at the same time, just so many great lines in that movie. Such a
sure.
quotable movie,
Yeah.
and it has that like heart to it too. At the same time.
Mhm.
And I mentioned to people when I watched it just a couple of nights ago with my kids, they can watch something that's new and they might be distracted by something, a new Disney movie or a new comedy or whatever, and they'll be distracted by things that are happening over here or whatever. When they watch the original Ghostbusters film, they're glued. The dialogue is so tight in that film that it keeps them engaged. The pacing, the music, the visual effects, even being dated, I still think they look great. I mean,
yeah, wonderful, beautiful
Yeah.
practical effects, and I'm a practical effects guy. I mean, I love all types of special effects, but there's something really special about a physical design.
oh, and it's unmatched with the Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man.
One of my favorites.
Iconic.
And even as a kid, it being a monster fan, seeing that practical of effect and seeing the beauty of matte paintings, miniatures, suitimation in a sense, and all the things that Chris and I love about tokusatsu films here in an American ghost movie, horror comedy movie. And so very cool to see that. And it wasn't a stop motion effect. It was such a clean look to it. Didn't need to be hokey looking. It was very much something you could take serious beyond the fact that it was supposed to be somewhat played for laughs. It popped into Ray's head like that. And but yeah, that's such a great way to end that film, with that huge explosion at the end and seeing all the seeing how it all kind of came together. And even that little nugget of don't cross the streams said earlier in the film coming full circle to the end, becoming the solution to their problem, not the cause of it. I love when they do that in scripts, that it's like, here's a little nugget, but this is going to come back and you didn't realize it was going to come back. Also, the improvisation from especially Bill Murray, but a lot of these lines were improv, not so much that they were scripted this way. I feel like that it just lended itself to really working well with that. And if I were a cast member of this, I'd be cracking up half the times because how do you hold a straight face during that?
I'm sure it was hard for like Ernie Hudson and Sigourney Weaver, the actors who weren't used to, dealing with, improv actors, at the same time, just kind of having a riff off them and, just continue acting, or like you said, keep a straight face and be able to complete the scene. And I love that you said the foreshadowing thing too with the crossing the streams, because, you rewatch the movie and you notice, the Stay Puft Marshmallow bag on Dana's counter. Or I think there's a shot too when there's some visual effects and you see a Stay Puft, ad on the side of a building, and you don't think anything of it, yet until the end of the movie, and it's one of those moments where it's like you don't see much of Stay Puft. He's only in there for a certain amount of time, but he just kind of stuck with everybody because he's such an iconic character.
Oh,
It's such a weird character to have, at the end of the movie like that.
And some interesting celebrity cameos that happened in the first film too. I think it was the first film appearance of Larry King, if I had to guess, and Casey Kasem's voice as well is in there. So
Husky Poltergeist too.
Yeah, I remember hearing that too. Yeah,
Evolution has the Ghostbusters vibe. Also, yes, it did take place in Arizona, where Everett is from. Beautiful practical effects. I hear a lot of people consider Ghostbusters video game to be the third film we never got, at least for back then. Also, it was Harold Ramis's last portrayal as Egon Spengler before his death. Yes, and recently we lost Ivan Reitman. So yeah, a lot of these guys are, they're getting up there in age, and
that's a great video game too, by the way. And it's a
excellent video game.
Good point you brought up, Chris, too, because I believe it was, from what I read, a lot of unproduced ideas from the never produced third film. There was many drafts, which I think some of them you can read online of some of Dan Aykroyd's versions, but it's a great game.
Yeah, it's such and replay factor. Like you can play it so many times, and it's just such a great story to tell. And as a Ghostbuster fan, you want to hear that story because it's kind of like you wanted a little bit more after that second movie, and they gave it to you while they still could.
When you were talking about like the Easter eggs, I'm sure in those games, especially the one that my son was playing on the Switch, I don't think that's the game that you're referring to, because he's talking about the game that I think my son was playing was like you're playing as a rookie and you go into the Sedgwick Hotel and all, but that's the one. Okay, so yeah, okay, so it is the used some of the unused sequel script, but the nuggets, the little Easter eggs that they put in there, and even in the cartoon series, I remember like Stay Puft, I think was like at times I think Ray was actually had it as like a doll that he would sleep with, like a teddy bear doll.
He was obviously one of my favorite episodes. That is the Murray the Mantis episode where they bring Stay Puft back, and me being a kaiju fan, it was fun to see Stay Puft, who was then the good one to fight Murray the Mantis.
Right. Yes. Yeah, the cartoon series had a lot of cool stuff, and even it had its moments as a kid, kind of scary.
Oh yeah, there were a few episodes that was like, you're scared of it as a kid, and I think of one, the long goodbye, which had the ghost Blackie, and he scared me to death as a kid, but I was just so compelled to watch it because it was spooky, but it was just terrifying, but it was just I had to watch more. I needed to watch more of it, but. So many great episodes, and what a great cartoon. I mean, I think we lived in a wonderful, wonderful age. We grew up with these amazing IPs, Ninja Turtles, Thundercats, Transformers, G.I. Joe, Silverhawks, all these real Ghostbusters. I mean, they were such a part of our childhood, and so funny. I think we were talking about this off camera too. Everything that is old has come back again, between companies like Mondo or Super 7 or Hasbro re-releasing all these things, and you're either getting new toys based on those IPs or you're getting reissues, and it's really great because those cartoons were something else, and they stand the test of time. And yeah, you can watch it now, and there might be some hokiness to it, but their rewatchability and the good memories you have just from watching it, can't beat it.
Oh yeah. And Nick, is there anything that in the collecting world that they have missed the mark on or haven't produced yet that it's like, why not? Why haven't they gotten to that point? And if you need a minute to think, I can fill.
I mean, one thing that I would like to see more of, and Maddie did do them in a pack, the courtroom scene, but the Scoleri brothers.
Oh,
yeah.
I love the Scoleri brothers, and that Maddie did them. Yeah, I don't know if you have those, Chris. I know you said you had a few Maddie collectors. So I have Nunzio and oh my gosh, can't think of the other Scoleri right now. But I have the Scoleri brothers, and those are the only two toys that I know of that Maddie made, where they actually made Scoleri brothers, and I haven't seen no Hasbro, nothing like that, making them. So I'm wondering why.
Yeah,
I did get some from I think it was Phantasm Toys. I follow them, and they came out with these cool two packs, and I was like, well, I have to have another one, so I grabbed those two. But those are the only two I have.
Yeah.
It would be great to have a collectible of them because that's such a great scene, you know.
The timing of that scene is incredible. Just the build to before they erupt out, and just the music build with that, all of it just worked so well with that.
I
So
believe Dennis Muren worked on. He did some of the visual effects for Ghostbusters 2 as well.
yeah, I think you're right about that ILM guy. Yeah. So Nick, you have a fan for your
Yeah,
shirt
that's my
there.
buddy Joe. What's up, Joe? So yeah, this is I said
Oh,
I
what
wore
a great
I
shirt!
wore this shirt for you guys, considering it's it's the monster. I had
That's
to wear my
awesome. I
Stay
love
Puft
it.
shirt for you guys.
It's funny when I think of Stay Puft, I don't know why, but I think of that the Chronicles of Narnia third film, when I think it was a thought that popped up into the boy's head that created the monster, and it was like, did he rip that off from? He couldn't have ripped it off from Ghostbusters, because obviously it's not Tolkien, the other guy, the C.S. Lewis. Yeah, if that was actually in the books that way. But I always go back to that idea that Ray, it's just with one thought that he doomed them in a sense. But it's so cool. But yeah, it's like, men, empty your heads. Usually we can. Usually we have no problems, but Ray's always thinking. So anyways, but we're going to wrap things up here. I really appreciate your gentlemen's feedback in on this. And this has been a really great conversation to have. And I just, I could talk about this stuff all day. I know you gentlemen could too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's so cool to discuss this. And I think it's something that every once in a while, it gets brought up, especially like now it's Halloween and you're thinking about ghosts and all this. And it's funny that they have the Ghostbusters Day, in June or July?
June, yeah.
June, yeah. So must have been, with the summer blockbuster release, I guess, if I assume why they did it then.
June 8th was the release date. So every that's I guess the official Ghostbusters Day, and then the meeting around the firehouse usually happens around that weekend, and it's just a good time. It's usually pretty warm.
Yeah.
But and you're out there in the afternoon. But there's a lot of people that show up, and there's a great vibe. So it's a good time.
Well, very cool. And I just, I think that it's going to live on through films, video games. We've got the new Afterlife movie. Maybe we'll have, some more sequels that are coming out.
I think, Nick, they are working on, they're in pre-production on the next one, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a year or two away. I think it's expected next year, but with all the delays, who knows? But, definitely, I think they're going to start production, like you said, soon. So very excited to see this continue.
Very cool. Yeah, and see a new generation enjoying this IP. And as I understand it, a lot of the fans, I haven't seen Afterlife, but as I understand it, a lot of the fans felt like it was a good continuation of the story, that there wasn't maybe a lot of hate rants thrown its way, I guess, unlike the 2016 film, again, not being named. But do you feel like the fandom really embraced it well?
I would say so. I mean, I have a pretty close group of friends that love Ghostbusters and follow a lot of groups, and I think it was the whole legacy of just Harold Ramis. I mean, it was kind of hard to critique the movie that hard when you really understood what kind of a movie Jason Reitman was trying to make, and the whole family aspect of the movie. Maybe people can relate in some way, shape, or form, and it was just kind of nice to have that closure on that character with Harold, not being with us anymore. So. Definitely, I'm not gonna lie, teared up a couple times. The first couple times I saw it, just because, again, Howard Ramis was such a good writer, and I think he left such a legacy behind in that character, and really brought that character, right off the pages onto the screen, and really encompassed them well. So I was very happy with it, and I think it added to that whole nostalgic feeling again of just wanting to see some of the old stuff mixed with a new generation of fans and some new toys.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah,
no, that's beautifully said. I mean, he really was. I mean, he was wonderful, creative force. Actor, director, writer, and just all around awesome. But I think the legacy of Ghostbusters, like you said, continues. I mean, we could, between comic books and video games, rewatching, the original real Ghostbusters, Extreme Ghostbusters. It's quite a legacy.
Yeah, and so entertaining, and that's why I appreciate you guys bringing this back out for this audience. I was going to ask Nick, do you do any kind of social outlets to show off your collectibles, or getting into discussion groups that people can maybe find you out there?
I actually do not, and you know what? I should. If I will, we'll keep in touch, and I think I'm gonna start something. I think it was more just me doing it for myself and not realizing, how it's weird to say, but not realizing, how much I've accumulated over the 30 something years. So I guess I definitely, with social media being the way it is now, I'm definitely gonna look into maybe starting a public page where people can maybe follow me and just share what they have as well.
I'd be interested in seeing either kind of a blog or podcast or video, YouTube channel, anything like that, some sort of content creation. I love seeing new content that talks about IP I love, and especially someone who really knows it through and through. And even in the kaiju universe, I'm learning from other kaiju content creators every day about things that they know that I wasn't quite aware of. And I love also bringing up things that I can share with others. So I think I'd be all for it if you were able to launch something. Maybe from here, can you take it and spin it off into something? That'd be awesome.
I definitely appreciate it. And I do appreciate it coming from you guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. And Chris, everyone should follow Seismic Toys on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and obviously go to seismictoys.com and check out all the great collectibles that he's got, and any events coming up that maybe people could catch you at. Probably not scheduled yet, maybe.
Just sort of figuring out my my November, so to speak, but I'll be at Superfest, New Jersey, this next one. And I do some of the Woodbridge shows as well. And I believe I'll be at one more show this month also. But, we're going to be having a bunch of things. So follow us. We're going to be having some announcements hopefully coming up in the next few weeks, months at Seismic Toys. So follow us there for all those awesome things.
Absolutely. And again, Nick, please make an Instagram and post pics of that collection. Awesome. Yeah.
I promise. Thank you.
You definitely get a good following if you could take it from there. Gentlemen, I'm going to close up the show. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here and joining in on the chat, hitting that like button, subscribe. Follow the Monster Report, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and obviously here on YouTube. And we just look forward to having another discussion with you gentlemen, maybe on another topic here in the near future. So again, thank you for your time, and stick around after the broadcast and we'll say our proper goodbyes, gentlemen. But thank you so much out there for watching another episode of the Monster Report Live. What quote from the movie should we sign off with? There's got to be one. There's got to be.
Nick, you got to pick it, Nick. You got to pick it.
Oh boy. Death is but a door. Time is but a window. I'll be back.
You got it. Awesome.